I am on a quest to read every Star Wars novel ever written, because to know an enemy you must study them, their history, their literature, their art. Do I have the patience to maintain this impression for the whole video? Perhaps.
No, of course not. But today's Halloween, and wouldn't you know it, I forgot to buy a costume. Thankfully I had something simple lying around the apartment I could toss on because I need to wear something as I finally talk about Star Wars: Heir to the Empire by Timothy Zahn. This is a Legends novel. It's the Legends novel, the first book that kicked off the expanded universe all the way back in 1991. Set 5 years after Return of the Jedi, the New Republic has taken control of the galaxy, but the fractured Empire has started to see a resurgence, winning numerous victories under the command of the cunning and ruthless Grand Admiral Thrawn. The first book in what fans called the Thrawn Trilogy, this book was so successful and well regarded that it kicked off the next 20 years of storytelling in Star Wars novels. And that being said, yeah man, it's pretty good. It's hard to find things about this book that haven't already been praised far and wide, but I guess I'm just gonna have to accept that I'm repeating stuff. I think that the biggest strength of this book is the new characters. In just this first book, Zahn introduces several characters that would go on to define the EU entirely, as well as make many fans' top 10 characters list, period, movies included. From the enigmatic and mysterious Mara Jade, to the buttoned-up and official Imperial Captain Gilad Pellaeon, to, of course, the legendary Grand Admiral Thrawn. I don't know that he really gets credit for creating Jason and Jaina Solo. I mean, he gets points for naming them, sure, but they're pretty nondescript as characters in Zahn's books, maybe because they're toddlers, but I do also want to give a special shout out. He's not quite as popular as the other three characters I mentioned, but I love Talon Card. Especially with Mark Thompson doing his voice in the audiobooks, he is the perfect silky smooth scoundrel. The plot itself is a little bit less significant in this book, but that's because it was written to be the first in a new trilogy, so it's setting up a lot of dominoes that will fall in books 2 and 3. However, I've always been a bigger fan of the first book or movie being able to stand on its own. Then you can use the second one as a sort of bridge between the first and the third. That's fine, you know, a cliffhanger like Empire is always okay. But I like it if the first one is entirely independent. So if I were to give one criticism to this book, that would be it. Actually, you know what? That's not true. This part's gonna go out directly to Timothy Zahn. Hi there, big fan, love your work. I need you, I beg you, to start writing things in ways that can be pronounced by human mouths. In this book alone, we get Nikolan, Bfash. Mithron Yoroto is its own issue, but that's introduced later. We'll give you a pass on that one for now. But Sabaoth, Sabaoth, please use more or less vowels in every word. I beg. Back to the good though, this book, perhaps more than any other piece of Star Wars media, prequels included, really captures the vibe of the original trilogy perfectly. Even the prequels went very shiny and chrome, like the Jedi Temple or Camino, that are perfectly clean and pristine, or places that feel like they're just props to be gawked at, like Dex's Diner. But a lot of the appeal of the original trilogy was that things felt worn and, more importantly, lived in. Even when you went somewhere clean like Cloud City, it felt like a natural extension of the same world as the other movies. The features of this book are places like Nikolan, whose mining operation is just as impractical and absurd as the bottomless pits on the Death Star. The planet Merkur perfectly fits the space fantasy vibe that Yavin 4 had, and that's only partially because they're both covered in forests. Zahn captured and emulated the original trilogy in ways that even George Lucas himself struggled to match. If you haven't read this one, I highly recommend it. It's well worth the read. If you have read it, maybe it's time for a reread. They're still great. Despite being the very first outing, this remains among the best that Star Wars publishing has to offer.
8 out of 10.